Now, many times, especially for carvers, you may have to replace the handle on your carving tools. This is just today a quick, simple way of making a new handle. The classic octagonal handle, I feel that they are really much better. Gives you a good grip, it prevents your tools from rolling off the bench, and they're fairly easy to make. The first thing you do is cut your stock. What I'm using today is 1-inch square stock, approximately 5 inches long. A good hardwood is the best to use, but even something as soft as poplar works fairly well. You don't have to be too concerned unless you're doing very heavy work. Then you really need to do the heavy and hard woods. First thing is cut your stock. I'm using 1-inch square stock today. The next thing to do is, probably you have already removed the handle, the damage handle from your tool. The dimensions you're going to be concerned with, and there's going to be a drawing for you in the file so that you refresh your memory as to what I'm telling you now, is the length of this tang is important. In this case, it's about 2 1/4 inches. The other dimension that you need to know is the diameter of the tang at its midpoint, what I call the tang midpoint diameter. These are two values that you're going to need to know when you drill the hole in the handle to make the insertion. The first thing to do is when you take your stock and this is also in your drawing, to determine the width of the flat on your octagonal piece. What it turns out to be is the width of a flat, to show you here, is 41% of the width of the tool. So in this case, I have a 1-inch block, so it's about 410 thousandths, or roughly 7/16 inches wide. That's important to know because that's how you're going to lay out these flats. So the first thing I'll do is I will find the center of my stock. You can do that pretty much by eye, just using the old finger method and with 4 strokes. So now we have the center line. I'll use this little convenient little palm punch, as I call it, to mark a little center hole. This will help me to get my drill started. The other piece of information that you're going to need is the diameter of this bolster on your tool. When you shape the end of your tool handle, you don't want to go below this diameter. So this one is, it's about 11/16. So I'll just take my compass that I've conveniently set to that diameter and make a reference diameter. This will help me to know where to finish the taper on my tool handle. The next thing to do is, again, to lay out now the location of the flats on your tool. I've used a marking gauge set to the appropriate diameter or measurement here, and I will just make and then I will do this on all 4 sides. These lines usually don't show up as sharply as you would like, so I will just reinforce them with my pencil so that when I'm doing the shaping, I'll know where my reference lines are and not go too far. So now we have the layout for our flats. The next thing to do is go over the drill press, and we will drill 2 holes into the end here to fit the tang. Now we hold the block, our stock, in a clamp. You don't want to hold this loose in your hand for one reason. It could get away, but secondly, you're going to be drilling 2 holes. You're going to end up with a stepped hole. Be sure you've checked the level, the squareness, so that your holes will be nice and concentric right down the center. Once you have this, then it's important to put a clamp so that this doesn't move. Now it's important to get this nicely centered. All of your table, your clamps, everything good and tight. This is no time for things to wander. Now, as I talked about the tang, I'm going to drill, in this case, an 1/8 inch hole to the full depth of my tang. This allows the fine point to go all the way to the bottom. The center of this tang, the midpoint, is 1/4 inch. I will counterbore a 1/4 inch hole to half the length. I'm producing a stepped hole. And this just helps to clear out a lot of the material to fit the tang when we're all finished. Again, the drawing in the file will have will show you all of this. Now I'm all ready to do the counterbore. In this case, it's 1 1/8 inches. Now we have the stock prepared, time to plane it. What I do is I've made a little wooden V block, and it just helps to hold it nice and square, easier to line up. You could do it just as well without it. And now it's a matter of planing to the line. I know what you're thinking. Why don't we just put it on the table saw? You're perfectly correct. It'd be very easy to do. In my situation, in my studio, by the time I have set up my saw, set it at 45 degrees, got everything set up, I can have this done. Besides, if we're doing hand carving, it makes sense. Why don't we do hand work when we make the handles for our hand tools? It's just kind of pleasant to do this kind of work. I'll just plane down to your line. This is not highly accurate work. It's nice to have a good sharp plane to do this. Any size plane, even a little block plane, would be just fine. If you were making a lot of these handles, I would be tempted to make a longer piece of stock, do the planing, and then cut to size. Then you could drill the hole for the tang. It's a matter up to you. Now we have a nicely shaped octagonal handle for our tool. Now the center hole and then the outline of where the bolster goes, you can do it in two different ways. You can plane down to that, coming back approximately 1/3 of the length to start your taper, and work your way around. Or when I do the finishing, I can finish that now on a belt sander just to get that curve. And then we'll be ready to mount the blade in the hole. All right, the final thing to do in the shaping is just go on a belt sander. I just lay it on the flat, and as I come off, I sweep it up this way, and that will produce this slight taper that we have on the front. And the final is just to round off the end. The final step is mounting the tool in the hole. What we'll do is we'll just drive it in, and as we drive it, we'll keep turning it, and it's going to act as a tapered reamer. And it'll fit perfectly. You'll bring it up to about 1/16 of an inch from the bolster, and then it can be driven home. It'll go a little slower if you have very hard wood. job is done.